So JJK chapter 254 is now officially out, so this is going to be my chapter review. Is JJK actually getting repetitive? Let's talk about it. Now, I want to use this chapter review to address these things because I did put out a video a couple days ago specifically on this meme and on the general discourse surrounding JJK, but it was more of a generalized response. And I can use this chapter review to specifically point out things that are nuanced and happening in each chapter. The story is evolving. People are just glossing over that and, again, memeing generalizations, saying it's repetitive, saying Gege is a bad writer. I completely disagree. All right, so first a brief recap of the chapter, and it was indeed Kusakabe Kaisen. Our man goes 1v1 versus Sukuna and shows out a bit, but unfortunately can't get the job done and ultimately gets folded by a couple slashes to the chest, at which point Ui comes in to try to save Kusakabe, but Sukuna is ready for him. However, Miguel shows up at the very last minute, saves Ui, and the chapter ends. And so here's what we have. New character shows up, Kusakabe is hyped up to fight Sukuna. Doesn't end up really doing anything. Sukuna then easily beats him. New character shows up, aka Miguel, is hyped up, yada, 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 right? This is the process that people are saying is repetitive and it's bad writing. And so here's what I'll say. On a very general level, this is true, but you could make this criticism about any story, especially any shonen battle manga. Like, you're complaining about characters fighting characters in a battle manga. And not only that, this is literally the main antagonist of the entire manga. And people are upset that other characters are coming in trying to be the big bad evil guy, right? For my D&D folks. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to say that, yeah, characters are showing up and fighting each other and that's repetitive, sure. But you might have found the wrong genre of story to enjoy if that's your legitimate criticism. Now, aside from that very generalized repetition, there is a lot of nuance that's happening in these fights. Gege is revealing details as we go that are building on this story. So that's what we're going to address. So the first thing I want to talk about is Kusakabe's simple domain. This is basically what the entire chapter was about, explaining how Kusakabe is so strong and why he is considered to be the top grade 1 sorcerer. It's because of this thing and the things he's able to do with it. Now, both Nanami and Meimei are also glazing up Kusakabe this chapter, but it's Gojo's statements that are the most interesting to me. And shout out to Lightning on Twitter for the translation here. But what Gojo says is this. What's more, he's also got a trump card, that simple domain of his. Beginners have to create various binding vows in order to establish them, but Kusakabe can do it without a binding vow. And the range on that thing is huge. This tells us so much, right? This explains why Kusakabe is considered the strongest grade 1 sorcerer, even without a curse technique. He has managed to create a simple domain without binding vows, and then is able to program that to do a number of things. And we see that in this chapter, right? He can automatically deflect anything that enters into the domain. Not necessarily anything, but he kind of has the auto attack set up. And then not only that, he can extend the range in an offensive manner. This is comparable to somebody like Miwa's simple domain, which has a similar auto attack effect, except hers, she has the binding vow where she cannot move in order to activate this, nor can she extend the range like Kusakabe. So this is a next level feat. And I would go as far to say that an analogy would be a simple domain to Kusakabe's simple domain is similar to a domain expansion to Sukuna's domain expansion, aka the open domain. In fact, both are noted for their increased range. Now you might be saying, okay, so what if he has a next level simple domain? That's the whole point of what we're complaining about. Somebody gets hyped up, but then they amount to nothing, so what's the point? The point is, it establishes some nuance in how this power system operates, and it sets the precedent of it actually being used. Because, I don't know, that might just relate to literally the main character. We were shown Kusakabe and Yuji training, and it's been very vague. We still don't know exactly what this was about. But even the body swap stuff aside, Kusakabe would have assuredly been trying to teach Yuji everything he possibly could. And Yuji, having been born similarly without a curse technique, he might have one now, but it's besides the point, would probably be a prime candidate for absorbing and understanding what Kusakabe was trying to teach him, because they both didn't have curse techniques, right? And again, with the body swap stuff included, it makes even more sense because he would be a prime candidate to actually literally learn from within Kusakabe's body. All I'm saying is this moment in 254 could have established a whole lot to explain Yuji's power-up if we get some moments from him later that are either him literally using this simple domain or using techniques that have been built upon the foundation that Kusakabe was able to show him. And instead of Yuji just pulling that out of nowhere 5 chapters from now, and everyone calls it an ass pull, we now have an explanation for this. I mean, Gege literally gave Kusakabe his honored one moment this panel. This wasn't unintentional. The glaze from Gojo, Nanami, and Meme is not just pointless hype. Gege is building story points that he is going to be building off of. If Kusakabe, a man with no curse technique, was capable of these heights, what may someone else be capable of who is in a similar position but doesn't have the same limiters Kusakabe does, aka Yuji? The next thing I've seen a lot of people complain about is how Kusakabe's injuries took place. Like, he's got the slashes across his chest, but he's still in one piece. You know, why is he not out here getting bisected like Gojo or getting minced up like a Kotsu? People are calling it bad writing. But no, this was intentional. This wasn't a weird power differential. Sukuna was laying a trap for Ui Ui. I even mentioned this was probably going to happen a few chapters ago because Sukuna has taken direct notice of Ui Ui coming in and teleporting people out. And he's not going to be okay with that. He doesn't want anyone getting away or potentially healed and coming back, right? So Sukuna lays this trap and it works. He is ready and waiting for Ui Ui when he teleports in to save Kusakabe. Now, it doesn't end up working because Miguel swoops in, but this wasn't bad writing. This was good writing. This was showing Sukuna adapting to his enemies and again, just proving why he's the best. And on that note, we got even more confirmation on Sukuna's prowess and perhaps some information on how he ultimately cut Gojo by finding out he can perform his curse technique activation without motion. And that aspect of the story is another one of the biggest things being explored in these repetitive chapters of Sukuna fighting the weaker characters. We are learning why he is the king of curses, why he was untouchable in his time. He is built different. Even though he is so weak and diminished, he is still adapting, learning, playing with his food, and beating everybody. I, for one, love this. I talked about it in my previous video from a couple days ago, but these fights are just showing how much different Gojo and Sukuna are from everyone else. I would have honestly been disappointed in the story if they just immediately took Sukuna out after the Gojo fight. It's just building on the prestige, building on the legend, again, not only of Sukuna, but also Gojo. And y'all know I love Gojo. And speaking of Gojo, on the previous video where I addressed these concerns of JJK being repetitive, some people commented that this was just copium from me because I thought Gojo was going to come back. And if Gojo comes back, then that just makes everything else okay. But that is not at all where I'm coming from. Everything I'm saying I believe to be true regardless of whether Gojo or not comes back. Even specifically, the stuff I've talked about in this chapter could be an explanation for how they're going to beat Sukuna without Gojo coming back, via Yuji just becoming strong enough to deal with Sukuna. So this has nothing to do with the Gojo copium, but I still do believe he is coming back. And then finally, I want to address the Miguel side of things. You know, basically nobody saw this coming. I loved the fact that he showed up, but a lot of people criticized it, saying that like Gege ran out of fodder to throw at Sukuna, so now he's just pulling characters out of his hat. That is such a disingenuous take. I've talked about this a little bit, but Gege has planned the ending of this manga a long time ago. That's not to say that he couldn't, have swapped details around and stuff, but Miguel showing up here is no coincidence, no mistake. We've talked about how JJK is a narrative circle, and there's lots of narrative symmetry happening both at the beginning of the story that's being mirrored here at the end. And Miguel is an enormous part of that. This is a character that went toe-to-toe with Gojo, the editor's comments, not mine, and now we're seeing him potentially go toe-to-toe with Sukuna, fighting the strongest at both ends of the story. Very similar to Jogo, kind of, in terms of just having the worst opponents, right? But so I am so curious to see what Gege does here. I talked about it in my Miguel video from earlier this week, but Gege commented that Miguel is strong. Like, it's not just a meme that he survived against Gojo. Clearly, Gojo wasn't trying to just take him out. We all know he could have if he truly wanted to. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he stood up to Gojo and, didn't get completely humiliated. It wasn't just the fact that JJK 0 was written first and so the power scaling wasn't set. Gege intends Miguel to be strong, and we didn't even see him use his curse technique. So what may he be capable of? I don't think he's just going to defeat Sukuna or anything like that, but I'm really interested to see what Gege has to show us with this character. And y'all, that's going to do it for this chapter review, but I want to give a special shout out to Darren, who sent me a sponsor question asking for me to talk about how I think Yuji might get powered up in the chapters to come, which I reference here in the Kusakabe discussion. But on top of that, Darren, I also put out a video a while back just talking about all the potential Yuji has. So if you haven't seen that, I would recommend checking that out as well to complement this, and I will link that down in the pinned comments below.